My name is Vincent. I use he, him pronouns, and I was born and raised in Sudbury. I was born in '89, and when I was growing up, I never heard the term transgender and didn't know that was a possibility, and was a bit of a tomboy as a kid. Everyone just thought that, me being more masculine was a bit of a phase, but that desire never went away. And there were a lot of these funny moments that came up when I was a kid, like when I was probably about 5 years old, I said to my mom, "Mom, when I grow up, I want to be a fireman." And my mom said, "Don't you mean firefighter?" And I said, "No, I want to be a fireman." And I didn't have the language to describe to my mom what it was that I felt. I didn't have the language to describe that I was transgender, and I also didn't have the language to really describe the profession I really wanted, because I thought firemen started the fires, not put them out. What I really wanted to say to my mom was, "Mom, I'm trans and I wanted to grow up to be an arsonist." But I guess that wouldn't have been appropriate. And so it did grow out of the fire starting, but I did not grow out of that innate desire and to be read as male and to live as a man. And growing up in the 90s, I experienced a lot of bullying in school because a lot of the kids assumed that I was a lesbian. Lots of homophobia, especially for, elementary school all the way up to grade 8. I attended Catholic schools. And when I did come out as bisexual, I was in a very strict Catholic school, and it did not go over well. And I had a very tough time. I experienced a lot of bullying from the teachers and from the principal. I think bullying puts it lightly. It was outright harassment, and it was a very difficult time for me. I was very depressed. I was very suicidal. When I left that school and entered high school, I was finally in a place where I could be myself. I ended up going to Sudbury Secondary, which is a high school that's known for its performing arts program. And going to a high school where I could be myself saved my life. While I was there, I started to figure out, okay, this goes a lot more than me liking other girls and me liking some boys. It was far deeper than just my sexual orientation. And that's when I started to realize, maybe I'm a guy. And I remembered it was halfway through grade 9, I went to Zeller's and I went to the men's section. I bought my first outfit from the men's section. And then I went home, I cut off most of my hair, I bound down my breasts with a tensor bandage, and I put on those clothes. And when I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw the real me for the first time. And that was the moment where I looked at myself and for the first time loved what I saw in the mirror. And I knew there was no going back. So I slowly started replacing all of my clothes with men's clothing. And by the time I was in the 10th grade, I was living full-time as male. And it was around that time, because I didn't want to come out to everybody until I had a name for myself. And it took me a year to come up with the name Vincent. And I figured it's the perfect name. Vincent comes from the Latin word vincit, which means to conquer. And when you are a 15-year-old megalomaniac, it just makes sense. Also, my favorite artist of all time is Vincent van Gogh. And I thought, why not? So that name stuck. And that's when I started to come out to my friends. I came out to my girlfriend in the 9th grade, and she was very supportive. But the coming out process stopped there for that full year. And at that point, I said, I'm going to start slowly telling everyone. Started with the friends online, started with the friends that I knew in person. I came out to her family, and they were very supportive. It was that summer between grade 10 and grade 11, I decided to start using men's washrooms in public. And that was an interesting experience because we're talking about Sudbury in 2005, and most people read me as female, and I was walking into men's washrooms. And I was really scared. I tried to avoid going to washrooms as much as I could, but when nature calls, right? And to my surprise, the worst I ever experienced was being escorted out of the mall washroom by security, and some dirty looks, occasional comments. But the more I did it, the less afraid I became, because I said, well, you know what? So far, it hasn't been as terrible as I thought. I haven't gotten beaten up. So I'm going to keep doing it. And when I was in the 11th grade, I decided to come out to everybody at school. I was the first kid in my high school to openly transition at school and to come out at school. I was the first student that the teachers and principals had to consider how to accommodate at school. And the school handled it very well, considering this was completely new to everybody. In fact, with some of the teachers, when I came out, I had to also explain what transgender is. And even though they had never really heard of it before, they were still great about it. I'm one of the few people I know who came out in high school who did not experience transphobia within the school. School for me was my safe place. And when I say that going to that high school saved my life, I genuinely mean that, because school and my girlfriend's house were the only safe places I had where I could be myself fully. My parents really struggled when I came out as trans. They had trouble understanding it. They were really afraid that I was ruining my life. Obviously, they were wrong. I'm fabulous and living a great life. But they had no way of knowing what the future would entail. As some time passed, they did come to realize if they didn't accept me fully, they would lose me entirely. Unfortunately, it took a suicide attempt and me ending up in the hospital for 3 weeks for that wake-up call. Fortunately, the wake-up call happened before there was any serious damage. And the good news is that had gotten the ball rolling for my medical transition. By that point, I was at a bit of a standstill. I had legally changed my name. I came out socially, but what I was really needing at that time was hormone therapy. And I ended up getting a referral to a gender identity clinic, and I was connected with an endocrinologist, and slowly that goal became a reality. I started on Lupron at 19, which was hilarious. On my 19th birthday, I got my first Lupron injection, which is a hormone suppressant. And I got to go through menopause at 19. Also, my birthday being in April meant I got to go through menopause for 6 months. And it was through a very hot summer. I turned to my mom one day in the middle of a hot flash and said, "Mom, when you go through menopause, do it in the wintertime." She looked at me and she said, "Son, it doesn't work that way." In 2008, I started my first year of university. I also started on testosterone September 2008. So it was a time with a couple big transitions happening in my life. Transitioning from living on my own with my girlfriend, being in university, which is an environment I loved and continue to love. I love being in academia. Being on testosterone and seeing those physical changes that I really, really wanted, like my voice deepening, my face getting hairier. Sadly, I experienced hair migration, but it turns out that I have a nice shaped head, so it works out anyway. But I do sometimes miss my hair. But take the good with the bad. And I started to feel happier and more comfortable in my own skin with every new hair on my face, with every change in my body that made it easier for other people to read me as male. And then in 2011, I went to Montreal and I had my top surgery. And it was the happiest day of my life. I woke up from surgery and the very first thing I did was, oh good, they're gone. Because my biggest fear was waking up and still having breasts. And then I remember very clearly the first time I was ever able to go swimming shirtless. It was July 1st, 2011. And it was such a liberating experience because I had never felt that confident at a beach before. I didn't have people staring at me because I had a beard and breasts that became very obvious once the t-shirt got wet while I was swimming. And yeah, people were staring at me because I had 2 big scars across my chest, but I didn't care. I have scars still and I wear them with pride because I'm just so happy with the results. Then I graduated from university with a degree in English literature in 2012. I was also unemployed because my degree was in English literature. And I did some soul searching and figured out, okay, what is it that I want to do with my life? Well, I started doing public speaking when I was in high school and did presentations about my experience as a trans person and did some Trans 101 type of presentations and thought, I wonder if I can make this into a career. And I thought, how can I make that happen? I had some experience with running trans support groups, and I thought I should go into social work. And I registered for the Indigenous Social Work program at Laurentian University, and 5 years later graduated with a Bachelor of Social Work. And through that time, I worked in a few different nonprofit organizations working in social services. For several years, I worked with a program called TG and Ourselves, which works with trans people from across Northeastern Ontario. For several summers in a row, I've been working with Rainbow Camp, plug for Rainbow Camp, and right now, Rainbow Online Connection, which is a virtual summer camp for 2S LGBTQ+ youth. I'm also working as a social worker psychotherapist in private practice, and I get to provide trans people with the support that I didn't have during my transition. And it is such an incredible experience because for me, I don't want people to experience the negative things that I experienced, that loneliness, that isolation. For years, I was the only trans person I knew. And knowing that no one has to go through that anymore in Sudbury is fantastic. Knowing that if somebody is having issues at work, that there are people in our community that will advocate for them, it's incredible. And I have this favorite quote, and it's from Jean-Paul Sartre, and it is, "Freedom is what you do with what's been done to you." There are things that happen in life that are out of your control. I couldn't control how people treated me and some of the circumstances that happened, but I could control what I did with those experiences. And doing the work that I do is where I found my freedom. My work doing trans activism and advocacy, support with trans people over the years has led me to some very interesting places. Back in 2016, I got to travel to Amsterdam for the World Professional Association for Trans Health Symposium. And I got to co-present with a student from the Northern Ontario School of Medicine. And it was such an incredible experience because we got to talk about the work that's happening within the medical school on supporting trans patients, training new and up-and-coming doctors on how to work with trans people. So being able to share what's happening in Sudbury, Ontario on an international stage was such an incredible experience. It was a career highlight for me. As somebody who I will say that I am professionally trans. I've turned ways of being proud of my identity into a part of my career. And to do so in such a way that I get to represent not only trans people, but a little city in northeastern Ontario that 95% of the people at the conference had never heard of. When I tell people I'm from Sudbury and they go, where's that? What is Sudbury famous for? I say, well, two things. It is the birthplace of Alex Trebek and the nickel capital of the world. So being able to say, not only is this happening, but it's coming from a city with less than 200,000 people in it. Another interesting highlight, and I know that there has been a lot of issues with police services, and this is in no way me saying, police services are great. I do want to acknowledge that back in 2013, we were approached by the Greater Sudbury Police Service because of statistics that had come out around police harassment and trans people. And that was big because at this time, there wasn't a lot of information internally on working with trans people who are under arrest or working with trans people who are coming in for support. Even things like, how do you mark gender when you're getting a criminal record check? And we were asked to help update the policies and procedures, and we took it a step further and said, we will help make a new training video and also train the entire police service. And we're not talking about just the officers. It was mandatory training for everybody. We're talking about 500 people. This included the board of directors, this included the volunteers, this included the civilian staff, everybody. And it was a way of saying, okay, yes, there are some systemic issues that continue to exist. Acknowledge that there are still more problems within many police services, including things that are coming up with things like racism. What we were able to do, though, is open the door to have these conversations and say, what is not going to happen is somebody being harassed because they are trans. And somebody coming in, even for the simplest thing, like getting a criminal record check, we worked with them to change the policies. So now, if you are getting that done, you can opt to not have your given name on your criminal record check, only your chosen name. So the way that it's done is, yes, they run the previous name, but on the form that you give your employer or an organization you're volunteering with, it only shows the name that you've chosen for yourself. And the reason that is, I had said to them, look, when I want to volunteer or work somewhere, it puts me at a disadvantage because I'm trans if it has the name my parents gave me, because that automatically outs me as being trans. But I'm fortunate in the sense that those organizations I've worked with and volunteered with, they already knew I was trans when they hired me because they've known me for years and because of all the activism I do. But what about somebody who is applying for a security company that may be very transphobic? They may not get the job because of their dead name being on the form. So they changed the policy, and that's been in place for several years. So a lot of interesting things like that have happened over the years doing this work, and some things that I'm very proud of. Another proud moment for me was when I was doing a presentation at one of the local high schools, and it was one of those situations, the entire school was in the auditorium, and I did this presentation, and I tell my story, and I tell the 70-minute version when I'm doing high school presentations, so it's the length of a period. And then a year later, I go to another high school, similar situation, full schools in an auditorium, and this kid comes up to me at the end of the presentation, and she says to me, I want to talk to you. I'm not trans or anything, but your story still really inspired me. And because you talked about your experiences with depression and being suicidal and all that, and getting through that, it inspired me to go and see a counselor. And because of your presentation, I stopped cutting myself a year ago. If I could just stop one person from experiencing what I went through, or because of my story, one person goes and gets help like this kid did, everything I went through was worth it. And I still get goosebumps when I tell that story because it was such a profound and heartwarming moment for me that I will never forget. When I first came out, I thought that it was devastating news that I was trans. People around me thought that I was setting myself up for a very difficult life. But the reality is, my life is great. I am happy because I'm trans and able to be myself. I can't think of anything worse than spending the rest of my life living a lie, and being able to be who I am and being out and being open about who I am is actually the greatest life I can imagine for myself.